I know it has been about a week since I've uploaded a video, and that is due to the fact that I just have not taken a trade, and the market has been a little bit slower and less revealing and less obvious in the direction that's been wanting to go. So during times like this, I've taken time to reflect and think about my trading journey. Actually, 2 days ago, I got a notification, a reminder that popped up on my phone that told me that it has been 2 years exactly since I have started trading. And after I got that notification, I just took a couple days to reflect and think about, where I've come, things I need to work on, and the reasons why I'm unprofitable still. I've also watched a couple other YouTube videos. One person that I really have to give credit to is Justin Werlein. He's a great trader. He's close with God, and ultimately does a good job speaking about psychology when it comes to trading. And there's going to be a few things that I'm going to talk about in this video. You know, Realizing 2 years after trading that he touches on potentially a lot better than I will because he's been through this journey longer than me. So I will leave the links to the videos that I gained inspiration from in the description. But as I sit here and reflect about my trading journey, I sit here and think why that I've failed up to this point. And when I really narrow it down, it comes to the idea of wanting money, if that makes sense. So wanting money, setting the expectation that I'm going to get money rather than focusing on the process itself. Um, I feel like I've had something to prove up to this point. Every bad decision that I've made while trading up to this point has ultimately been rooted in the idea of making money, and ultimately that can be seen in some of my entries. Getting in too late, FOMO because of FOMO. I've talked about that in a couple of my trade recaps up to this point. I know it's only been a few of them, but it can definitely be seen. Not taking the optimal entry because of FOMO, and it all comes back to the idea of having something to prove, which is going to lead me into telling a little bit more about my story. So I started my trading journey a little bit into college. Um, I've always been fascinated with the market, but I've always had this idea to prove something, and that has ultimately been a big problem for me in my trading journey. My girlfriend at the time, we had broken up. I had a little bit of money in Dogecoin before all the crypto pumps were happening, and I actually had just a little bit under $1,000 in Dogecoin and watched it blow up to above 40 grand, and didn't withdraw it because I was just at an emotional point in that time due to the fact that school and a bunch of other personal factors, and I was just clouded by that judgment. I was just euphoric and thought that I couldn't lose, and it comes back to the idea of making money. My parents are a little bit older. I feel like I have the duty to provide for them, and because they've done so much for me, and it ultimately just comes back. I'm putting a lot of pressure on myself to make this work. Between providing for my parents and getting revenge against my Dogecoin loss, and attaching an ego to this trading stuff. I saw trading as a way out, as a way to prove myself. We see all this stuff on social media, and ultimately it's a bunch of BS. It it puts a mask over what it's really like to trade and the problems associated with it. They just show side effects of the outcome and not the process. I mentioned that I kind of saw trading as a way to prove myself, but that's not the sole reason that I started trading. I've always been interested in the market. I started during high school, actually, before COVID. I mean, a couple buddies and saw that COVID was becoming a bigger thing, and we invested in some healthcare stocks, and this idea of using logical thinking and smart decisions as a way to benefit also kind of piqued my interest, but also comes back to the idea of making money. You know, I started off hot in my trading, when I started trading, and one thing that I would like to talk about is a quote Mark Douglas talks about when he mentions being euphoric. A bunch of the traders are closer to becoming profitable when they first start than when they are throughout most of their career, because we have the feeling that we can't lose. And that's kind of what happened to me. I started off real hot, feel like I couldn't lose. And as soon as I got my funded account, I was doing good for a while. And then I hit a first couple, losses in a row. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not used to this. So now I've just double downsized, try to make it back. And that's ultimately how I ended up blowing my first couple funded accounts. And once again, it comes back to the problems of having the idea of making money and trying to do it soon rather than focusing on the process itself. And what I've been working on this year is building good habits, just outside of trading to start. And because unfortunately it's not translated to my trading up to this point. Things I've been doing, you know, I put a big emphasis on going to church, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because I've actually enjoyed it. Feel like I've grown closer to God. I've been working out 5, 6 days a week. I'm in the best shape of my life. I've quit going out to the bars every weekend, drinking excessively in that aspect. Every now and then it's okay, in moderation, but going out and just making a party life out of it is not the best thing to do. And overall just quitting bad habits that you shouldn't be doing as a male and replacing those with good ones, even if it's starting small, like making your bed every day, because that's what I did. Just started off making my bed, and then it just snowballs effects into good habits. Going to the gym every day, going to church, forming new connections, learning how to speak better, stuff like that. You just got to start off small. When I started doing these things, I've gained so much satisfaction from these new habits. So why don't I focus on building good habits in the market up to this point? And that was just something that I've reflected on. If I can build these good habits in real life, they've helped me realize that I have not been building good habits in the market. I've been focused on making money, and ultimately it goes back to the idea of having to prove something and wanting the money rather than focus on building the good habits like I've done this year outside of trading. Going forward, I need to stop trying to force this. I feel like I've got all this um, responsibility on my shoulders with things going on outside of trading, but I need to focus on the process itself. This really isn't like anything else or any other business where, if you have your own business like lawn care or landscaping, you go up and knock on people's door for business to try to take in just as much as possible and to take as much action as possible. Trading really isn't like that. You really have to sit back, be patient, and and focus on building the skills rather than constantly going, go, go, go. I can tell there is such a disconnect because where I've started to build these good habits outside of the market, you've just started appreciating life for what it is. I feel much more content, less stressed, and at ease. But when it comes to 9:30 when the market opens, I instantly get stressed out again, and feel some anxiety. And ultimately, like I said, that comes back to the idea of I'm not focusing on the habits. I'm coming into the market thinking, how can I make money today? Rather than what good habits can I show today? I need to quit thinking what's next in terms of viewing the market and learn to sit on my hands and sit for hours or days or even weeks at a time if need be. I need to reprogram myself to be satisfied with making the good decisions rather than what my P&L looks like. I need to have the goal of falling in love with the process moving forward and letting go of the obsession with money. And that's one thing that I've realized and reflected on over the past few days. And ultimately, Justin Werlein, I watched some of his videos, like I mentioned earlier, and like I mentioned, I will also leave the links to those in the descriptions. But watching those has just kind of been eye opening to me because he has done a phenomenal job talking about psychology and trading and outside of trading. But with that said, going forward, I'm going to focus on the process, and hopefully, I hope that's going to lead to new things for me. And focusing on this process, I'm going to start to reprogram my brain to gain satisfaction from the process itself. And I feel like that's going to lead to a lot less anxiety and stress while viewing the market. I know I spoke a little bit about it in this video, but if you're also struggling with the psychological curve that comes with trading, the psychological barrier, I really recommend going and watching Justin's videos that I'm going to leave a link to, because they've just really opened my eyes tremendously. Helped me grow as a better person, as a better thinker, as a better speaker. And I just wanted to get my thoughts out moving forward, get everything out on the table, and see what we can do, see what I can do moving forward from this point. So if there's anything else that I can do for anybody that's viewing this, please let me know. And that will be all.